according to Jonathan. Hi there, and welcome to another live stream with myself and Richard Smith. Hi, Richard.
Hello, how are we doing?
I'm doing very good, and it's nice to see you in a different shirt today. Like a rugby-based one.
This is a polo shirt, so believe it or not, I've got lots and lots of different shirts. It's not the same shirt I wear every week, contrary to popular belief. I just find the darker colors work better for me. I used to be all for the white shirts, but the blacks and the navies are the shirts that I've been wearing. But yeah, I felt like a change today. So I felt like trying to show the guns off a little bit. Not that I've got any anymore because I don't train.
Or pistols. You've got pistols.
My pistols, yeah.
Yeah. So what's anything been making you triggered or angry, or anything you want to talk about in particular?
Oh my goodness, you know, there's probably so much that we can cover. One thing that I did want to cover today, this evening, but not until 7:30, was a question that I had on my YouTube channel about an hour or two ago in regards to, can the carnivore lifestyle help with gout attacks? But that person, I went back and I've asked that person if they can join this evening so we can cover that in more detail, so we can just explain to everybody. But they can't join until around 7:30. So if we could pick that up at some point in the second half. Beyond that, apart from the general stupidity of people, no, I'm all good. What about yourself?
Well, yeah, I did a little experiment to see if people were awake. And I did a carousel, which Anthony Chafee very kindly shared, where it just tried to make people look at things differently. And it was a little image, 2 batteries, a little small battery, packed full of energy, and a really big bulky one, which had the same amount of energy, but it was a big bulky old battery. And the analogy was that the little battery full of energy was fat, and the big battery was carbs. And I just pointed out that everyone talks about, oh, it's really bad to have fat because 1 gram, it's got 9 kilocalories, but 1 gram of carbohydrate only has 4. And that's the wrong way to look at it. I was just pointing out that you eat more, you eat over twice as much by weight. So I did this sort of reasonably simple graphic. I put the word calories in inverted commas and then did the calculations. And basically, if you was to eat 2,000 calories of fat, I know we don't believe in calories, but you know, because it's heat energy, but that's how it's deemed in the mainstream, and that was the point. If you eat 2,000 calories of fat or 2,000 calories of carbohydrates, by the end of the year, if you did the carbohydrates, you would have eaten 100 kilograms, 220 pounds worth of food extra by weight. And what makes me laugh is the people can't see the irony of their comments. Well, why is that a problem? Why is eating so many more? Why is it a big problem eating so much more mass? And I just flip it around. Oh, why is it so much of a problem to eat less mass? You know, if you're getting the same energy, surely you've got 100 kilograms less per year for your body to process, less excretion, more bang for your buck. You know, so basically you're eating about 8.5 kilograms extra a week. You know, so why not do that? So I just thought that was quite interesting to put that out there and see how many people just can't think differently. A simple thing to say, just flip it around. It's not 1 gram having 9 kilocalories. It's not about that compared to 4. It's about how much you eat. You see, now these are the people that talk about portion size and being balanced and moderation. And yet when you tell them, well, what you're doing actually isn't moderation, they don't like it. Yeah. So I sat back and enjoyed watching lots of comments. Most comments actually got it and were really good. I just had a couple of people going mad and saying, oh, you're nuts, you're crazy. And I'm like, okay, just tell me why you think eating an extra 100 kilograms per year of food is okay. So there you go. Now, I've got a question here that's come up. I need... so let's have a look. Let's put it on the screen and read it. Anything from muscle meat and fish I would need that I wouldn't get from variety of offal, marrow, and pork, jowl, bacon, if marrow is a rich source of omega-3? I think that's a question.
Yeah, marrow is a good source of omega-3. There's nothing, I believe, that we can't get from just eating meats alone. There are carnivores out there that just eat grass-fed meats, beef and lamb. Do we need offal? Would be a question. I consume offal. I don't think, at the end of the day, if we take a step back and look at the average person on the high street, they're alive, they're kicking. They may not be optimal, but they are surviving. And even with the athletic community that we look, who are heavily carb laden, some of these people are incredibly fit and healthy, yet they do not live our lifestyle, and they are still consuming lots and lots of toxic compounds. So when we look at carnivore, I think, and just eating meats in general, can we survive just eating muscle meat? Well, of course we can. We can survive eating rubbish. So this isn't about survival. This is about optimal health. Offal is a fantastic source of nutrients. Beef liver being amongst some of the most nutrient dense on the planet. Heart, kidney, so on and so forth. I don't eat them every day. I do put them in maybe once or twice a week. Liver, I tend to keep to around about 500 grams a week, give or take. Hearts, I love. I think hearts are fantastic. Kidney, fantastic source of DAO. So offal is a fantastic source of nutrients, but do we need it? No, but I would argue that it is preferential for optimal health. And the reason being is when we look at the methionine to glycine ratio, and this is an argument that's put forward quite often from the vegan community, eating all of this meat is going to alter the methionine to glycine ratio, both of which we need, but excess meat consumption increases methionine, which is then buffered by glycine. So the body has this mechanism in which it will use glycine to buffer this increased level of methionine, which causes issues with glycine levels, because as you know, glycine is a very important component of collagen. It's integral for the vascular endothelium, tendons, ligaments, joints, so on and so forth. And we can increase the glycine consumption if we eat nose to tail. So the argument would be, if we are eating nose to tail, that we are going to combat this methionine to glycine ratio. But when we look at muscle meat in general, that ratio is roughly, and I may be slightly out, it's roughly 3-1. And what we need ideally is a 4-1 ratio. But if you are eating just muscle meats, then eat the stringy pieces on your beef. Eat the pieces that are stuck to the bone. So always try to eat meat off the bone. If you're eating chicken, eat the cartilage. I had chicken last night, as it happens. I tend to have chicken once a week lately. I'm not a massive lover of chicken in regards to the nutrient profile and amino acid profile, because I believe that red meat is far superior. And obviously there is a concern for me in regards to the chicken being fed grain and the higher linoleic acid content. But chicken is a fantastic source of collagen if you eat the gristly bits, and I literally take off the marrow off the end of the bone, or the cartilage on the end of the bone. On the end of the bone, there's like a little cap on there which you can tear off, and I eat all of that. So I quite literally eat every part. There's nothing left on the bone. And then coming on from that question, the bone marrow is a fantastic source of omega-3, but meat contains omega-3 also. And when we look at the nutritional profile within these foods, we always look at 100 grams, but we don't eat food as 100 grams. That's not how nature provides it, is it? So one of the comparisons that you'll often see is, vegetables per 100 grams, i.e. kale, spinach, whatever, compared to a piece of beef that is 100 grams. Even though the animal proteins beat these hands down at their own game, when we look at these compounds, 100 grams of kale is quite a lot of kale. 100 grams of spinach. That's quite a lot of spinach. But you wouldn't eat 100 grams of beef. You would, you'd be eating 500 grams, or quite often in my case, 1,000 grams. But we don't eat foods in nature by grammage, do we? It's, so when we look at this, the omega-3 content in red meat is actually pretty high. It's high enough. You don't need to eat fish for omega-3s. I'm a massive fan of bone marrow. If you can eat the marrow from your bones, this is what we would have done during our evolutionary period. We would have crushed the bones. Every part of that would have been out of the bone. We would have crushed the bones, and we'd have eaten as much of the bone as we could have. We don't do these things anymore, and this is why certain compounds within the body, vitamins and minerals, may be out of whack compared to how we evolved. And this is why some people need to supplement. But if you eat nose to tail, and you eat the bone marrow and all the cartilage and all the stringy pieces on the bones, which most people don't want to do, but I quite enjoy, then you will obtain every nutrient. But coming back to the comment I made earlier on, this isn't just about surviving. You can survive on crap. If you eat a standard diet, you can survive, and you will live until you're 80 or 90. And if that suits you, that's fine. But 80 or 90 is not a very good age to live to. As we know from the research that, Stephen, you've mentioned many times, the human body is capable of not just surviving, but thriving to 120. I personally won't be happy with 80 or 90. I want to live a lifestyle that I thrive. I'm not in this for survival. I'm in this for thriving. And that's what my lifestyle gives me. And that's why I eat nose to tail.
That is a superb answer, Richard. And behind the scenes, Richard was covering up my technical problems, and I think I've got that sorted. I was running on a battery because my mains lead wasn't working. Big, glamorous insight. LNS, what are your thoughts on boron? The carnivore diet is low in boron. Yep, it is. It's not an essential nutrient at all. Still being researched. There seems to be little requirement for it. I see Richard nodding, which is always good. There is some roles allegedly it plays, but as I say, it's not classified as an essential nutrient. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, look, we always look at the things that we don't get from eating specific. There's very little in the way of vitamins and minerals that in fact, there's nothing that we can't get that we need from living this lifestyle. And as you say, when it comes to things like boron, is it essential? Well, no, it's not. People will pick on things that are not within our diet. The question that I always throw back to people who ask these questions is, well, first of all, what range are we meant to be in regards to these things? How much of these nutrients are we meant to consume? These figures that we are given, they're made up. These figures are made up by groups of people who know very little about nutrition. And even when it comes down to, and we've mentioned this many times previously, vitamin D levels, cortisol levels, what's the normal range? Well, who wants to be normal? Normal people are not healthy. Normal people are sick. Boron is one that gets thrown up from, my goodness, what's his name? Saladino. Can you forget Saladino's name?
Well, there you go.
But I mean, again, I come back to what is evolutionary appropriate. And during the Ice Age, we didn't eat fruit, we didn't eat plants, and we survived and thrived on nothing more than animal proteins. Are they essential? No, they're not. Am I lacking because my boron levels may be low? I don't believe so. I'm 40 and I'm healthier and fitter than I've ever been, and I would argue considerably fitter than someone who is supplementing or consuming boron from other means. I don't think it's one we need to be concerned with.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I want to point out, I did some research, and it's interesting you mentioned fruit there. Did you know that 92.5% of all plants are not fit for human consumption? Now,
Yeah.
if you write into ChatGPT what percentage of plants are fit for human consumption, they actually answer with the word potentially. And they give you a very high percentage, something like 75% are potentially fit for human consumption. So if you do any sort of research, I'm just teaching people now, really, really dig down and say, okay, you said potentially. Let me find out, what do you mean? What is actually fit for human consumption right now? So we've gone from something like 400,000 plant species, of which 300,000 are potentially all right, to 7.5% are all right. So it's gone from 300,000 down to 30,000. So that's a real answer. So you have to dig down. The other thing I was going to say was, I was actually looking at supplies of fruit and veg around the world, and Rich and I are going to do a much better video than this sort of little sort of random thing that I'm doing right now. But for instance, if you live in the UK, apples will be around for on average between August and September, and strawberries and blackberries are the other two big fruits in Britain. And if you was to try and survive on them, you wouldn't be able to for 6 months, because apples last between 1 to 4 weeks. Strawberries last 5 to 7 days, even when refrigerated, and blackberries can be stored for 2 to 3 days under proper refrigeration. So that's our biggest 3 supplies of fruit in the UK, of which they wouldn't be around for 6 months, and when they are picked, they don't last long. All right, so that was the UK. So I thought, well, let's not just pick UK. Let's have a look at Sweden. Sweden was the same thing, different thing. Apples, lingonberries, and bilberries. And again, same thing with apples. Same thing with strawberries, 5 to 7 days, and bilberries last a couple of days, even in refrigeration. So in Sweden, for 7 months of the year, there would be no fruit available. So, the more northern you go, I'm not going to bore you with all the facts, but the more northern hemisphere you go, the less the chances are of having fruit all year round. And then I went to Australia. Now, Australia is quite interesting because they do have an apple that lasts all year round. So, full disclosure, wanted to say that. Okay, so what does one of those apples present to the world? It's called by some as the apple of death because it's got a terrible sap, numerous toxins, and can cause blistering. So that's it. So right, just to nail the sort of ancestral thing, and talking about boron, of course, it's a metal, and for 350,000 years, we've not worried about whether we're getting enough boron. We've got to look at this as being a species appropriate diet. Rick here, who I often mention as one of my long-term carnivores who finds it sustainable, says, why doesn't everyone switch to food mass, not calories? And isn't that obvious? If you have a huge mound of food in front of you, and then someone says, oh, you can have this food, this much smaller thing here, and get the same bang for your buck. What's going to make you feel less bloated? What's going to make you feel less heavy? The other thing is calories, right? If you drink a litre of water, you will put on weight. You go on the scale after a litre of water, you have ingested 0 calories. All right. And anyway, I'm not going to get into this because I will get cross. Primal Mike. One for you, Rich, definitely. What electrolyte ratios would you recommend to people that need them? Which is a really nice bit to add, that need them. Would you say 1-to-1 sodium potassium via potassium citrate and Redmond would be good? That's Redmond salts, by the way. People like Elements, but their ratio sucks. Well, we're not going to knock other companies, all right? So we're just going to answer the first part about the ratios. Do you need it up there, Rich, so you can refer to it? The question.
Yeah, if you leave it up there, yeah, fantastic. So yeah, look, it's as nature intended. We need considerably more potassium than sodium. If we look at most animal proteins, with the exception of things that give life, i.e. an egg or milk, the ratio is 4 times potassium to the sodium. And then this is considerably higher than magnesium, with calcium being right at the bottom. And magnesium and calcium tend to be a ratio of 1-to-1. Now, the thing, it does become incredibly difficult when we look into sodium and potassium, because the body works with these differently. So the body will reabsorb a lot of the sodium that we put in, but it doesn't reabsorb a lot of the potassium. But if we are living a carnivore-based lifestyle, then we are consuming plenty of potassium from the animal protein. So from my opinion, from a supplementation perspective, and it does depend on whether you are training, whether you were looking to fuel an event, or whether it's health and well-being. First of all, the source of those ingredients. I would always preference things like citrate in regards to the potassium in particular, for a number of reasons. One, it helps bind to oxalates during oxalate detox and allows us to combat those things. It's highly bioavailable, and it also is a segue into something that I want to speak about now in 10 minutes time, which comes down to the gout issues, because it can help with gout attacks also, through the same mechanism with binding to those monosodium crystals. But in regards to the ratio for standard health and well-being, you want a 1-to-1 thereabouts. If you're going to go higher on any, once you've gone through that adaptation process, I would even preference potassium more than the sodium. But we live in this lifestyle, that we're coming in from an elevated insulin lifestyle. We're suffering with this insulin resistance. When we gravitate into going low carb, insulin drops, and it signals the kidneys to release sodium from the body, from 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys, which leads to a deficiency in sodium. So initially, the early stages, we need lots and lots of sodium. The problem with this is that sodium depletes potassium. So now we're in a potassium deficiency. And also, when we go through that oxalate detox, that can lead to hypokalemia, which is a deficiency in potassium. So potassium really needs to be preference. And I would argue that it is more beneficial, or just as important as the sodium. You want a ratio of around 1-to-1, if not higher, in the potassium. I am going to develop a product that is going to be higher in potassium. This is going to be more so for the athletic performance market. But the first one that I need to get out there is the unflavored version, which is going to be the same as the one that we're doing now, but without any stevia. Once that's been produced, then I'm going to look into this ratio. But it depends on what your goals are. But for optimal health, I believe that ratio is 1-to-1. I do believe a lower potassium to sodium, I don't believe that's optimal. Yeah, I'm not going to put down anyone else's brands, but I don't believe that is optimal.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think we need to do that, because people can make their own decisions. Right, we got another question for you. By the way, there's 86 people watching at the moment. Congratulations, Richard. 52 on your channel and only 33 on mine. So my followers are letting me down, but it's really nice that your followers are. But that's reflected in the question. So people might say, oh, Stephen's a bit quiet, but I'm not here to have the light shone on me. If it's all for Richard, that's fine for me too. The lad's got a really good...
We can share the light.
Yeah, well, yeah. And you've got a great video with Zoe Harkin, which I think is just about to hit 10,000 views. So that's great. Right. Carl, evening both. Richard, there you go. Can you mention the high heart rate question we spoke about yesterday? Stuart will be listening. So, yeah, can you repeat the high heart rate question from yesterday?
Yes. So Carl came to see me in the office yesterday. Carl and I went for, I would say, a breakfast downstairs, but it was steak and eggs. The cafe downstairs beneath my office, which is way too convenient, cooks everything in butter for me. So Carl came for a consultation. We went there. Anyway, it was a question in regards to increased heart rate when living a ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle. A number of things can cause this. Initially, it could be too much fat. Too much fat can cause distress to the heart and can speed up heart rate because the gallbladder may not be efficient enough. So in that case, I would recommend lowering the fat and even breaking the meals up to maybe 2 to 3 times per day. Within our community, we quite often look at this OMAD or 2MAD, 1 meals or 2 meals per day. I'm not always convinced that's optimal, especially for women. And I know the question isn't related to women, but for hormonal function, I tend to find that more frequent meals, up to 3 times, no more than 3, is optimal, while keeping those meals about 4 hours apart. But that's a topic for another day. So it could be too much fat while gravitating into the lifestyle. And the next thing is a segue actually from the last thing, because low potassium. So low potassium, we need potassium to calm the heart. So this excess sodium through the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, and it can go both ways. It can lead to increased heart rate or low heart rate. But increased heart rate is usually a sign of low potassium, and it's quite often to do with too much sodium. So maybe remove the salt from the meals potentially, and just keep an eye on that potassium, or supplement with potassium. But generally, it does tend to even out as we adapt to the lifestyle, and the body adapts to utilizing and processing this higher fat for energy, and coming from the state of insulin resistance, because we're coming from, I think the person that Carl is speaking about is an athlete which was predominantly carb-based, if not solely carb-based, I believe. Carbs, and coming back to the thing that you mentioned earlier, Steve, in regards to this, this calorie and mass, it isn't just about the mass that we're consuming from those foods either. People, they seem to forget that this sugar that they consume causes oxidative stress. The compounds from the seed oils cause this electrophilic stress. It alters things like the NAD plus to NADH ratio by as much as 400%. When you cause oxidative stress to the body, this can last years, specifically from seed oils. So it isn't even just weighing up the mass. We've got to think about the other downstream deleterious effects of consuming these foods. But as we're coming from a diet that's high in carb, the body is coming from a lifestyle of abuse. It's recovering from all of this oxidative damage. You go through a healing process, and it does take time. But the key, I think the two takeaways there are increased potassium or lower sodium. But again, you may need the sodium to overcome this drop in insulin and combat that keto flu symptoms. So adding more potassium might be beneficial, but reducing the amount of fat or splitting the meals up in frequency, that can usually help with that. And also bear in mind, this time of year increases heart rate. I noticed that during the winter periods, we are more susceptible to viruses and infections. We don't know that we have them because our bodies are so efficient, but they're constantly fighting these things off in the background. I've noticed that my resting heart rate is currently around 11 beats higher. I'm perfectly fine. It's not affecting my health. It's not affecting my performance, but there's something there that my body is dealing with, and behind the scenes also.
I think it's getting rid of that cold that you had for a little while. Mike is saying red meat is high in potassium, so I'm getting enough by eating 2.5 to 3 pounds of meat per day. Sodium, just salt to taste. Yeah, perfect. I got it right. And this is the interesting thing about these questions. You see that there's no right answer, because somebody will say, well, I work out ever such a lot. Another person will be sedentary. One person will be 4'11", another will be 6'7". So we're just giving you general guides about everything and trying to give you the understanding. And if you want to know about oxidation and you never understand it, just think of the word Leo. Loss of electrons equals oxidation. All right. And that's all it is. Electrons being lost will cause oxidation, or think of rust or something like that. Right. Sash mode, which is still one of my favorite names on here. Protein in meat. Are people working out the protein cooked or uncooked? I.e. boneless chicken thigh, 650 grams, uncooked, 140 grams of protein, cooked, 400 grams equals 86. Big difference in grams of protein. Well, I can't speak for other people. I don't track at all. I'm really sorry. I do it nutritionally and intentionally by intuition. That's it. So tonight, we had a joint. That was it, a joint. And I just looked at the plate and thought, that's enough. But how do you do it? What do you get people to do, Rich, when you're advising people when they start?
So I work it out generally on uncooked, but then I do recommend that beef in particular is cooked rare. Things like ground beef for our friends in the States, or minced beef for the guys listening in the UK, you can eat that raw. Whether you want to try it or not is up to you. But I always recommend uncooked. But protein is the one thing that you don't want to underconsume. Now, the beauty for this is we do have a large room for movement in regards to protein, because we need around 0.5 grams per pound each day on average to allow us to perform all of the work that we need and prevent any muscle wastage. 0.82 will allow us to heal, repair, and grow and carry out all of the functions, so on and so forth. This is why I typically recommend around 0.9 to 1 gram per pound per day, because this should give you an excess. So you shouldn't be deficient. But the one thing that I always recommend or advise on, at least not needing the requirement to track, is protein. And again, eat to satiety. It's surprisingly easy to consume enough protein in the day and feel satiated with it. But if there's one thing you can go over, it is the protein. Fat is another topic, but if you eat this fat that we consume with animal proteins as nature intended, then typically the ratio is right, and all of these things just fall into place. There are levers that we can pull depending on goal and preference moving forward, but eat as nature intended, eat the fat with the protein, and if you are tracking, aim for 0.9 to 1 gram per pound per day, uncooked weight. But if you want to go over, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I do that. If people want, they insist on a guide, I say, well, roughly speaking, 400 grams of a steak is going to be about 100 grams of protein. It's about 25%. And that normally does it for people. Or you see, with eggs, nobody weighs eggs really. They just say, I have 4 eggs in the morning or 5 eggs. So, just try and get into just being a little bit more relaxed about it. This is a really nice question from Rick. He's a really good supporter and rarely asks a question. So we'll put it into the mix. Although not a ruminant, Muscovy duck looks and tastes similar to beef. Any idea if the meat is a healthy one to consume? Absolutely. Oh, yes. Zinc, B vitamins, iron, protein, obviously, and considered a delicacy in a lot of cuisines. I don't know if you've ever had it. Rich, have you?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
One
right.
to add
Okay.
to the list.
Yeah. Now, let's have a look. All right, let's have a look at this comment. Matthew. Hello, Matthew. Lamb has a lot more omega-3 than beef. Would you agree, Rich?
Yeah, look, lamb is one that you and I think we should start a new movement. Grass-fed beef gets all of the airtime, and I put this down to the movement from the States, because that's where this movement typically came from originally, wasn't it? Was the States, and thank you to them for that. But lamb isn't one that isn't preferenced a lot in the States, but we have access to lamb, readily in the UK, and I genuinely believe lamb to be equal to, if not better than, for a number of reasons. I believe the amino profile could be superior, the vitamin and mineral profile, and that's not to say that beef isn't. But I think maybe we should start a lamb movement, grass-fed lamb. But I'm a big lover of lamb, big lover.
Excellent. Now I'm going to give you a little nudge, because you said at 7:30 you wanted to say something.
Yes. So let me see if I can share my screen. No, there is a reason for it. And this is...
And while you're setting up the screen, Carsten has put a question up. I'll answer that, and then you can do your screen. Like vitamin C, thiamine B1 is low in red meat. Thoughts? No, it isn't. 3-ounce serving of red meat has a lot of B1 actually. So I looked up some other bits while Richard was doing that. So pork tenderloin contains 1.6 mg of vitamin B1, which is 137% of your daily recommended requirement. So there you go. Pork and beef got both fine. Pork chops will give you 96% of your daily requirement of B1. So I think this is one of the things. There is a lot of misinformation out there about vitamin C, because vitamin C is in red meat and vitamin B1 is in red meat, and it's definitely in pork and in abundance as well. Right. Do you want that on the screen, Rich?
Yeah, just circling back to that really quickly. The interesting thing with vitamin C is it is found in animal proteins. I think it's, from memory, about 3.5 milligrams per 100 grams, which sounds low, but again, we don't eat these foods per 100 grams. It's a lot higher in liver and fish roe and so on and so forth. But the thing with vitamin C is that it's absorbed through the GLUT4 transporter, which competes for absorption with glucose. When you live an animal-based lifestyle, our consumption of carbohydrate, i.e. glucose, is a lot lower. Now the requirement for that vitamin C has come down because it's no longer competing for absorption. So we, being carnivore, ketogenic, whatever tag you want to put on it, we need, our requirement for vitamin C is considerably lower than that of a person who is consuming a high carbohydrate lifestyle. But yeah, when you're ready, and this is just a snapshot from Google. And the reason I put this on there is it highlights the polyol pathway. So I'll read from there. The polyol pathway is a two-step metabolic pathway in which glucose is reduced to sorbitol and then converted into fructose. Now, why is this important? Because the question that I wanted to cover was gout. Now, gout, we are told, is caused by purines, which increases uric acid. And we're told to avoid things like red meat because of the purine content. But purines are created naturally within the body. They're created from the breakdown of cells when we create energy, things like ATP, GTP, DNA, RNA, so on and so forth. But yes, they do produce uric acid, but they do not cause gout. We should not be avoiding meat, particularly red meat, if we have gout issues. Now, uric acid potentially can be the problem. It can be increased by purines, but fructose. So coming back to what I mentioned there, fructose is one of the biggest contributing factors. And there's a lot of nuance to this because gout is an inflammatory condition. It's caused by inflammation, which is exacerbated by insulin resistance. So if you live in a lifestyle that consumes lots of carbohydrate, over time, we're going to become insulin resistant. And seed oils also, because seed oils, which are high in the oxidized omega-6 linoleic acid, will increase insulin resistance at a higher level than excess carbohydrate consumption. But it's this state of inflammation. Now, if we consume fructose in the form of fruit in a natural source, like an apple, a banana, or berries, so on and so forth, the effect is minimal. But this, as I'm pointing on the other screen there, the polyol pathway is the conversion of glucose into fructose. This pathway is increased tenfold in a state of insulin resistance. So there's a lot of nuance to this. Fruit, yes, you can consume, but if you are suffering with insulin resistance, then maybe fruit is one you want to avoid because of this polyol pathway. So fructose, it's the only sugar that generates uric acid during its metabolism. Monosodium urate crystals are salts that are formed by the uric acid within this conversion. And these monosodium urate crystals activate a number of inflammatory pathways. And I'm going to share my screen again. I don't know if, yeah, perfect. That's on there. So that there now, this is to do with central adiposity or visceral adiposity. But I just want to highlight the fact that fructose can cause this, this inflammation. And there's another paper on you that I want to also show. But inflammatory pathways can amplify a gout attack, and fructose readily depletes ADP, ATP, leading to this leukocyte response, particularly through ICAM1, I believe it is. In fact, I think I've got it on another screen somewhere. The overconsumption of fructose leads to this inflammation in all cells that metabolize it. And this inflammation leads to this intracellular cortisol level, which is what is highlighted there. So fructose causes inflammation. And in fact, there we are. So fructose, is that on that screen there? Yeah, fantastic. So fructose induces the inflammatory molecule ICAM1 and more cells. There's lots of other inflammatory cytokines and other mechanisms that cause this, this inflammatory response. But it comes down to this inflammation. So if we are over-consuming fructose, then if we suffer with gout, then our chance of a gout attack is massively increased. Now, I know there are people listening who suffer with severe gout attacks who do not consume fruit or very little. But fructose is found also in grains in the form of fructans. So when we consume grains, bread, pasta, rice, etc., these fructans get broken down into fructose. And this can contribute, again, leading to this increase in the polyol pathway and this inflammatory response through the fructose. Alcohol is another big responder, particularly from things like beers and lagers, again, because of the grains. Sucrose, which is a form of glucose, and fructose, again, this increases that polyol pathway. It all comes back to this inflammation. And that's what gout is. It's an inflammatory response. This is why some people who suffer with or have high levels of uric acid within their joints do not suffer with gout, because they are not insulin resistant, or at least on the lower end. So this is why we see many people who have uric acid within their joints but don't suffer with gout. There are other factors. I remember we were speaking to Ben recently, Ben Hunt, who said he had a gout attack and it was caused by a knock, an injury, which led to that inflammatory response. So the root cause of this is inflammation. Insulin resistance is right at the root cause. So we need to address this insulin resistance. In order to do that, we need to start looking at a low carbohydrate, ketogenic, carnivore-based lifestyle. These foods that are low in fructose, low in sugars, carbohydrates, things that are going to elicit a low insulin response and allow us to reverse this insulin resistance. In the meantime, what you can do, coming back to the point that we mentioned earlier, magnesium and potassium also reduce the risk of gout, because they work in the same way that they do with oxalate buildup. They bind to these monosodium crystals, and they allow us to excrete those from the body. But key takeaways, we need to be living a lifestyle that is low in carbohydrate, it's going to elicit a low insulin response. Meat is the way forward. We don't get this response from eating meat. The beauty of being ketogenic and carnivore also is that the body creates beta-hydroxybutyrate. Beta-hydroxybutyrate, master ketone body, blocks a pathway called NLRP3 inflammasome. It blocks inflammation. This is why when we come away from all of these toxic foods, our gout attacks completely clear up. So come away from the fruit. You've got to drop the grains. Come away from the alcohol. Milk is another known contributing factor also, but it's improving this insulin resistance. As we come away from insulin resistance, the body begins to heal and repair this inflammatory response. But it is as simple as that. It's this inflammatory response caused by insulin resistance. Carnivore is the key. We can still elicit this response through living a ketogenic lifestyle if we are consuming foods that contain other compounds, certain vegetables. But the grains have got to go. The seed oils have got to go. The alcohol has got to go. Just by making those changes, you should see a huge resolution in any gout attack. And it is as simple as that.
Yeah, as simple as that. There you go. And I've got a video from Chuck about a month ago, who had gout for 30 years. Couldn't believe that carnivore sorted it out very, very quickly. And people pick me up on my language here and say, well, it wasn't carnivore, it was removing all the other stuff. Yep. I have no argument with that either.
Yeah.
But you got to eat something. If you
Yeah.
take the grains out, you take the carbohydrates, you take the plants, you take the fruit, the veg, what you're left with. Anyway, right. Carnivore Muscle, thank you very much. Richard, get monetized so I can send you some money, which is really nice, Jonathan. If you want to give us super chats, it's really great because it supports the channel and it helps us give this content out. Don't forget, we give an hour and a half of our own time up every Sunday to answer all your questions. Right. Now then, we said that Rick was a nice guy, so we know that this is meant in a nice way. Why do people say sodium? We would burn up if we ate it. Absolutely true. It's sodium chloride, potassium chloride, and another form. Yes, absolutely. But I think we all know we're saying sodium chloride. I think.
Yeah,
but you're right.
100%. Look, you and I have noticed this many times recently, Steve. We did a super simple series of videos on insulin resistance and diabetes, and we used terminology that the more our biggest followers, the people who are highly educated understand the terminology we were using wasn't 100% correct, but it's terminology that is generally accepted and understood by the masses. And this is why sometimes you use this terminology, is because many people don't understand the difference. And I think we were speaking about my goodness, what was it? Insulin resistance. And it's something we've just mentioned 2 minutes ago during the gout attacks. Well, technically, insulin resistance doesn't really exist. It's a natural response, isn't it? But there's an awful lot of nuance to this, and sometimes I think you and I try to simplify things so the general populace can understand. But yeah, 100% right.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about calories, because people get it. They're pointless. Units of heat that have no mass. Anyway, we won't get into that. Right. Just for people that seem to be interested, I just mentioned how many people from each channel. So we've got 95 people watching, 37 from my channel and 58 from Richard's. So that's great. See, Richard, I told you, you're going to get more and more popular. If you want your question to be bumped to the top, by the way, two things I want to say. The super chats help. It helps us, but it also gets that starred and easy to see. So our thanks is to answer that question. Second thing is, how much do people at Amazon take? So today I've released a Kindle version of my guide to being carnivore, and they take 70%. So Amazon get most of the money, just so you know. Right, here's a question from Lisa. And yeah, you can look up that book on Amazon, by the way. We'll talk about that later. Lisa, does supplementing with cod liver oil to get vitamin D, is it worth the oxidative damage of the oil being a liquid at room temperature? What a really good question. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, look, I don't recommend supplementing with any cod liver oil whatsoever. There was a study that we've referenced a few times which shows the oxidative process on all cod liver oils. It doesn't matter how pure it is. All of these oils oxidate over time. I don't believe that the net gain is worth the oxidative stress. If you want, to consume these compounds, eat it from a food compound and eat fresh. Don't supplement with cod liver oil. Vitamin D is another tricky one. I don't really agree with supplementing with vitamin D either, because you can get all of this through the diet, i.e. animal proteins are full of vitamin D. Eggs contain vitamin D3 and K2. It's the perfect food to consume to increase your vitamin D. But the thing with vitamin D is it's a fat-soluble vitamin. We need the fat to go with it, which is why I believe the question was in there in regards to the cod liver oil. Yes, we need the fat. And this is why we should eat as nature intended. Supplementing with vitamin D3 does very little in the body unless we co-consume it with the fat, because it doesn't work as well unless you co-consume it with the fat. Eat as many of these things from nature as you can. If you want, cod liver oil, eat cod liver. Eat some oily fish.
Yeah. Now, I would say in my early years, I found a difference when I started taking cod liver oil in my joint pain. So I think, I'm going to steal a phrase in a minute, it conferred a benefit. Now, it could have been because I was on a low-fat diet. So I was at least getting some fats. And I was a big proponent of it. I actually thought cod liver oil was really good from personal experience and other people's experience. But on this way of eating, I've realized it probably wasn't the cod liver oil. It was probably the introduction of fat in a low-fat diet or a terrible diet where there was no fats coming in. I am now getting tins of actual cod liver in their own juice, which is really scrummy, very tasty, actually, and really filling. And now, I think we've done a bad job here, because Plum is asking this question. I don't think we answered it clear enough. Stephen, please read this. Can I rely on just offal, marrow, and fatty pork jowl and no muscle meat?
Right, okay. Quite possibly. I'll be honest, I think that the shift should be the other way around, if anything. Now, the reason being with this is that liver is incredibly high, and people come back to the vitamin A. I'm not overly concerned with the vitamin A. And I'll be honest, those studies come from the polar explorers, in the Antarctic, isn't it? When they consumed polar bear liver, which is something stupid, like 1,000 or 100,000 times, the volume of a cow liver. I can't remember exactly.
About 1,000 times.
It's 1,000. It's whatever it is. It's considerably higher. So I'm not even concerned about vitamin A overconsumption. It's the copper when it comes to the liver, and these other heavy metals that are contained within the animal. Now, if you look at an animal, the organ meats proportionately are incredibly small to the rest of the animal, and I think that we should eat as nature intended. Most of our nutrients should come from, or at least the volume, the mass should come from the muscle meat. The organ meats are considerably smaller. Can you survive on them? Again, you could survive on eating cornflakes. It's is it going to confer a benefit? Are you going to be healthy? I should imagine so. But is it optimal? I would argue the opposite. I would argue that you're going to be more optimally healthy if you are consuming muscle meat with little bits of organ meats rather than predominating organ meats. But that is just my opinion.
I'm going to say, I wonder what Plum's reason for not having muscle meat is. So there may be a reason there. So that's a subsidiary question. What is the problem with muscle meat? It could be cost, could be misinformation, but we don't know. But I'm with Rich. I think, well, let's put it this way. If you said, I'm going to go on to offal, marrow, and fatty pork jowl, I'm a vegan at the moment, you're going to get a bit healthier, but it's not optimal. So it's all a matter of sort of perspective, where you're coming from. Here's an interesting one. Are there pros and cons to unflavored sparkling water? Yes, there are pros and cons to it. Unflavored sparkling water for some people might be incredibly dull. For other people, it might be a breath of fresh air if they don't like just drinking water, which is understandable. Of course, if it's carbonated, you're putting that into your system, so your body has to process it. So for some people, it can make you a bit windy, it can make you belch because the body has to get rid of that extra carbon. So there's that. Have you got any pros and cons, Rich?
No, I think you've nailed everything. To be honest, you are the water guy when it comes to the water questions. Yeah, I always listen intently when you are answering those types of questions.
That's okay, mate. That's all right. That's okay. Right, Selena, I've started logging all my find since joining the Healthy Living Club, which we call the Fat Club as well. Realized I wasn't eating anywhere near what I thought I should be, but do find it difficult to eat 0.9 grams of protein per my ideal weight. So Selena's talking about the Fat Club, which you can join on our Mighty Networks. So here's a little bit of the hard sell, guys. If you haven't looked at our Mighty Networks, you can join. There will be just links in the description. And the Fat Club is a monthly thing that just keeps rolling over month by month, but it is daily guidance for at least 8 weeks. There is literally over 8 weeks of original material there to help you with the carnivore diet. If you're new to it, how to start, everything is all there. But Selena, that's one of the good things about this is you suddenly realize you may be under eating or you're not getting enough protein. So maybe you can join the meeting tomorrow. So another thing we do is live at 5 o'clock within the Mighty Networks. We do a live question and answer. So hopefully we'll see Selena there.
Yeah,
we are coming up. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, just a tag onto that, Steve, just to reiterate what you just said there. I mean, you and I go live every Sunday, 7 p.m. for Q&A for free. We also do within the Mighty Networks group for free, which is a Zoom type presentation. You can come on, you can ask any questions. You don't have to put your screen on. You can mute and even type in a message, but it's a means for us to answer questions, any burning questions that you have. And those are fantastic. Those are great tools to use and use them. This is what we're trying to do with the Mighty Networks, is build this network, the support network. But also, Stephen and I offer personal coaching. So should you have any burning questions that maybe you don't want to put out in public, or you want to go into a little bit more detail, then our coaching services are available. So check those out also. They help massively. As I say, this content that we put out is free, And the coaching side of things is how Stephen and I pay the bills. So, in order to us to continue to put this free information out, subscribe to our channels if you haven't already. It is so important to subscribe to the channels. I'm one for not subscribing. I never thought it carried any importance, but it does allow us to continue to put this free content out. Without your support, we would be unable to continue to put this free content out there. So click that subscribe button and join the Mighty Networks. It is free.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I am a consumer of YouTube, and I can remember when I was watching Ken Berry, and he would say, "Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, hit that little notification bell, and all this sort of stuff." And I said, "Oh, he's always going on about that," but it makes a difference, because if you want to get this message out, so your subscriber count makes YouTube pay attention and puts your videos out to more people. Right? We've got 5 minutes, but Rich, you've only got 3 to answer this. This one's gone to you. If we haven't got to your question, do apologize. You either have to get here early, you can post your question before we start, so it'll be at the top of the list, or you can do the super chats, or you can follow us onto the next platform, which rhymes with apple crumble. But anyway, El Don Canadines, Richard, mTOR reset. How does 4 hours compare to 2 to 3 hours between meals?
And I've got 3 minutes to answer this. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, we can always go over to apple crumble.
Look, yeah, we can. Look, we can nail this in a couple of minutes. Pretty simple. 3.5 to 4 hours is optimal. The mTOR reset begins. mTOR and AMPK are always both activated. We look at these things as one is switched on and one is switched off. The processes that are continuously going on in the background, it's just one predominates over the other. This mTOR reset is maximized around 3.5 to 4 hours. It doesn't mean that you can't elicit that response sooner. It's just it's going to confer more of a benefit if you leave it closer to the 4 hours. And again, to elicit that response, we need to activate mTOR through, and there's a number of ways that we can activate mTOR. The best way is through the consumption of the amino acid leucine. Leucine is predominantly found in animal proteins. You can also supplement with it, but we need around 3 grams of leucine for optimal mTOR activation. Now, you can activate it from as little as 1.5. But again, we're talking optimal numbers, and this is why 3 is the figure that we throw around. Now, to put that in perspective, 3 grams of leucine is around 6 eggs. So eggs are not a brilliant source of leucine unless you consume enough of them. This is why whenever I consume eggs, I'm either consuming 4 with other meat products or 6 on their own. Leucine, 3 grams is typically found between 40 to 50 grams of animal proteins, depending on the cut. But that 4 hours is optimal. It doesn't mean that you can't elicit a response before. How that confers into percentage gains, look, it's one of those things that it's going to be it's virtually impossible to document and to compare through clinical trials, research, and studies. But it does help. It's all about these 1%. If you were to improve 1% each day, at the end of the year, those 1% all add up. If you're not adding in those 1%, doesn't mean that you're not going to gain and improve. It just means that recovery, that healing, repairing, muscle protein synthesis, so on and so forth, is going to be less than it was prior. Does that mean that when I was bodybuilding, that I was always activating the mTOR reset based on the 4 hours? No. Because life gets in the way. So sometimes it was 3 hours, sometimes 3.5. Sometimes I couldn't elicit those 4 responses that we've mentioned previously. Sometimes it would be 2, sometimes it would be 3. This is all about best endeavors. So, when you have the knowledge in order to that, then you can implement that knowledge as best as you can. Without it, then you can't implement it. But it's all about best endeavors.
Brilliant. Rich, okay, we got 50 seconds. That's a brilliant answer. If you want to see more of this, the next hour we are on Apple Crumble, and the link is in the chat if you want to do that. That would be great. And Plum has said the reason she doesn't have the muscle meat is she reacts to beef and ground lamb is too expensive. Yes, the meat might be because of histamines. Totally understand that. So anyway, I want to thank every single person for tuning in and watching us, and hopefully we'll see you on the next platform. So bye-bye, everyone.
See you all. Thanks again.
Yes, it's not ending because my computer is playing up a little bit. But anyway, we'll see you.